Everyone has a voice that narrates their mistakes back to them at the worst possible moment. It shows up right before sleep, almost every night. It shows up mid-conversation when you replay something you said an hour ago. Neuroscience now has a fairly precise map of where that voice lives in the brain. Marcus Aurelius, without any of this research, figured out how to quiet it almost 2,000 years earlier. The inner critic is not random noise at all. Researchers trace it largely to something called the default mode network. This is a set of brain regions that activate when you are not focused on an external task. This network handles memory. It also handles self-reflection and imagining how others see you. It is genuinely useful for planning and learning. It is also, unfortunately, the exact system that fuels harsh self-judgment. This happens when it is left unsupervised. Studies using brain imaging show something specific. People prone to self-criticism display heightened default mode network activity during idle moments. The mind, given no specific task, defaults to something predictable. It reviews its own perceived failures. This is not a character flaw whatsoever. It is simply what an unstructured brain tends to do. This is especially true for a brain already primed by anxiety or perfectionism. Marcus Aurelius spent his evenings doing something specific. It functioned almost like an intervention for this exact pattern. He wrote in a private journal. He never meant to publish it, and no one else was meant to read it. He wrote purely to externalize the noise circling inside his own head. Modern psychology now understands why this actually works. Writing down a thought forces it through the brain's language centers. This recruits the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning and executive control. That recruitment quiets the purely emotional loop running underneath it, noticeably. He wrote something that reads almost like a clinical instruction even today. He told himself not to waste the rest of his life imagining what other people think. The only exception was when doing so served a clear benefit to the common good. Notice carefully what this actually does. It does not silence the critic through force. It does not use denial either. It reroutes attention away from an unanswerable question. That question is, what do others think of me? It moves toward a more answerable one instead. What is actually useful right now? Neuroscientists studying self-talk found something remarkably close to this same mechanism independently. People who practiced distanced self-talk showed something measurable. This means referring to themselves by name instead of using the word I. They showed reduced activity in brain regions tied to emotional distress during stressful tasks. Marcus Aurelius did something structurally very similar. His journal entries often addressed himself directly. He wrote almost as an outside observer offering counsel, rather than a victim absorbing an attack. This distancing technique matters far more than it first appears. When the inner critic speaks in first person, something happens. The brain treats the criticism as an inseparable part of identity. When the same thought is reframed even slightly, something shifts. Examined as a passing mental event rather than an absolute truth, the emotional charge drops measurably. Marcus Aurelius seemed to intuit this centuries before anyone could show it on a brain scan. Epictetus offered a companion idea. It fits directly into this exact neuroscience. He taught that events themselves do not disturb people. Their judgments about those events do. An inner critic is essentially a judgment. It simply wears the disguise of a fact. Neuroscience now confirms something clear. Judgment and fact activate completely different circuitry. Treating a harsh inner comment as verified truth engages one specific system. Treating it as an unverified opinion engages a different system entirely. This opinion is worth examining, not obeying, and the resulting system is calmer. There is a specific practice that emerges from combining both traditions together. First, notice the inner critical voice. Do not immediately agree with it. Second, write it down in plain language. This is the same externalizing move Marcus Aurelius used nightly. Third, address yourself by name or in the second person. This creates just enough distance for the reasoning brain to engage. Fourth, ask whether the thought serves any real, useful purpose right now. Or, ask whether it is simply old noise repeating itself out of habit. None of this eliminates self-reflection. Self-reflection remains genuinely valuable. The goal was never to stop examining your own behavior at all. It was simply to stop confusing examination with punishment. Marcus Aurelius examined himself relentlessly every single night. He did so as a disciplined observer correcting course. He was never a prosecutor building a permanent case against himself. Seneca captured the emotional cost of getting this exact distinction wrong. He wrote that a mind anxious about the future is already miserable. It becomes doubly miserable when that anxiety turns inward with no clear resolution in sight. The inner critic, left unmanaged, produces exactly that doubled misery. Judgment layers endlessly on top of judgment. No actual improvement results from any of it. Marcus Aurelius did not silence his inner critic by pretending it did not exist at all. He gave it a job instead. It became a nightly appointment on paper, a specific outlet outside his own head, instead of unlimited access to run commentary all day long. Neuroscience today has names for this. It calls it externalization and cognitive diffusion. He simply called it picking up his pen before bed. He did it again the next night, and the night after that. He kept doing it for as long as it took to become quiet. Consider what actually happens inside a mind that skips this step entirely. The same critical thought arrives at bedtime, unexamined and unwritten. It loops silently instead of being externalized onto paper. Because it never passes through the language centers doing the sorting work, it stays vague, global, and impossible to resolve. Vague threats are far harder for the brain to file away than specific ones, so the loop simply continues, night after night, with nothing ever actually settled. Writing works partly because it forces vagueness into specificity. A foggy feeling of having failed becomes a written sentence describing exactly what happened and exactly what, if anything, needs correcting. Once a thought becomes that concrete, the brain can finally treat it as information rather than an ongoing emergency. This is not a metaphor borrowed loosely from psychology. It shows up clearly in research on expressive writing, where participants who wrote about stressful events in specific detail showed measurable improvements in both mood and physical health markers compared to those who wrote only vaguely or not at all. Marcus Aurelius never had access to that research, obviously, but his instinct matched it almost exactly. His journal was not vague venting. It was precise, often naming the exact person, the exact situation, and the exact judgment he needed to examine that night. That precision, more than the simple act of writing itself, is likely what made the practice so effective at quieting a mind otherwise prone to endless, foggy self-attack.